Today we will talk about the dining philosopher's problem. In computer science, the dining philosopher's problem is an example often used in concurrent algorithm design to illustrate synchronization issues and techniques for resolving them. For the scenario, there are 5 silent philosophers sitting at a round table with plates of spaghetti. A fork is placed between each pair of adjacent philosophers. A philosopher needs both fork on his left and right hand to eat, else he cannot. Two problems can be encountered in the dining philosopher's problem. One is the deadlock. Each of the philosophers pick up his own fork, so no one can eat, hence a deadlock. Second problem is starvation. If a philosopher is not able to eat for a long period of time, the philosopher may die of starvation. There are a lot of possible solutions for the dining philosopher's problem. We decided to present 3 possible solutions. First is the resource hierarchy solution. Second, the arbitrator solution. And for the third, this is the Chandy Misra solution. Now, let's talk about the resource hierarchy solution. This solution to the problem is the one originally proposed by Dijkstra. It assigns a partial order to the resources and establishes the convention that all resources will be requested in order, and that no 2 resources unrelated by order will ever be used by a single unit of work at the same time. Here, the resources will be numbered 1 through 5, and each unit of work will always pick up the lowered numbered fork first, and then the higher numbered fork, from among the 2 forks they plan to use. Since it is stated that the forks to be used shall be requested in order, the philosopher with fork 1 can initiate the request. And as can be seen on the illustration, philosopher 1 started eating, while for philosopher 2, since he is missing fork 2, the next person in order that can be allowed to eat is philosopher 3. Now, since there's only 1 fork left for philosophers 4 and 5, they need to wait until the other forks become available to them. Once both philosophers currently eating are done, philosopher 2 can now request for the forks as with philosopher 4. And the cycle goes on. By doing this, everyone in the table can take their turn to eat. This is the resource hierarchy solution. Next is the arbitrator solution. Another approach is to guarantee that a philosopher can only pick up both forks or none by introducing an arbitrator. Example is a waiter. In order to pick up the forks, a philosopher must ask permission of the waiter. The waiter gives permission to only 1 philosopher at a time until the philosopher has picked up both of their forks. At the end of 5 turns, all philosophers will have the chance to eat. This is the arbitrator solution. Now we will talk about the Chandy Misresolution. In 1984, K. Manny Chandy and J. Misra proposed a different solution to the dining philosopher's problem to allow for arbitrary agents. To contend for an arbitrary number of resources, unlike Dijkstra's solution. It is also completely distributed and requires no central authority after initialization, meaning there's no need for an arbitrator or a waiter. Here are the steps for the Chandy Misresolution. For the first one, for every pair of philosophers contending for a resource, create a fork and give it to the philosopher with the lower ID. Each fork can either be dirty or clean, but initially, all forks are dirty. Second, when a philosopher wants to use a set of resources, said philosopher must obtain the forks from their contending neighbors. For all such forks the philosopher does not have, they send a request message. Third, when a philosopher with a fork receives a request message, they keep the fork if it is clean, but give it up when it is dirty. If the philosopher sends the fork over, they clean the fork before doing so. Lastly, after a philosopher is done eating, all their forks become dirty. If another philosopher had previously requested one of the forks, the philosopher that has just finished eating cleans the fork and sends it. Here is a sample illustration for the Chandy Misra solution. If we follow the first step in the Chandy Misra solution, it is stated that for every pair of philosophers contending to eat, a fork shall be generated. Now, since there are 5 philosophers contending to eat, 5 forks shall be generated between them. And as stated as well in the first step, the philosopher with the lower ID will be the priority, meaning philosopher 1 shall be given a cleaned fork by philosopher 5 and 2. A fork shall also be given to philosopher 2 by philosopher 3, and so on. Philosopher 5 will be the only one without a fork during this first turn. After philosopher 1 has eaten, philosopher 2 can now request to have the fork back, as well as philosopher 5. Philosopher 3 and 4 might request to have their lent fork back as well, but as stated in step 3, if the fork is still cleaned and unused, the philosopher holding the said fork shall keep it. Hence, philosopher 2 keeps the one borrowed from philosopher 3, and so on. This time, it'll be philosopher 1 who'll have no fork during this turn. Now, the cycle will just continue until all the philosophers can have their turn to eat. Starvation and deadlock is again avoided by using Chandy's or Misra's solution. Here's where my discussion about the dining philosopher's problem ends. Thank you for listening and have a good day.